I wonder what difference it would make if we knew beforehand that every one of our experiences, no matter how dark or difficult, would shape us in a way that would enable us to make unique contributions to the family of humanity. But we never know that for sure, and I certainly did not know that when I was growing up in a troubled home.
Meet Robert, a beacon for Black voices and the vast world of media. Growing up facing challenges unique to the Black experience, he became a guiding light for others in the community. Imagine a world where not every Black individual gets a chance. Robert changed that narrative. In an industry where Black voices were often sidelined, Robert pulled up more chairs for them.
Everyone's ISO should be set to 100.
Having come from a single-parent household, my mother raised my sister and I by herself. My sister is a year older than I am. Because my mother was a single working mother and had to work, a single working parent, she worked a majority of the time, so we were left unsupervised a lot, all the way through our early years, all the way up through our teen years.
Well, my mother had to leave us at home a lot. And like I say, he just had to get into stuff. She told us one time, don't let the furnace go out. He went outside to play, the furnace went out. So he came in squirting all this stuff in the stove and threw a match in there. I said, well, you can't put your head in there. He said, well, it won't come on. And he stuck his head in there and the whole thing blew up.
Being unsupervised led to a lot of problems growing up. My mother was an orphan in her childhood, so she had very little understanding of how to be a parent. And consequently, by that being the case, she made a lot of mistakes as a parent, and I had to come to grips with a lot of things that happened in my childhood because I think my mother never got over the fact that she and my father never got together in marriage. My father had me and my sister out of wedlock. And my father was, he was not a person that was ready to settle down. So he kind of, ran around and my mother was very angry about that and very hurt.
He had a lot of challenges of people not believe that he was going to amount to anything. He didn't really believe what people say. He had to see for himself. When he was very little, every toy he got, he had to tear it apart because he wanted to see what made it tick.
All through childhood, I had to hear about how I was no good, just like my father was no good, because I guess I looked like him. So she took a lot of that anger that she had toward my father out on me. And so I grew up with a very poor self-esteem after hearing that through my developmental stages and hearing it from someone that you look up to like a parent. I continued to act the role out that I was no good and I was never going to be any good. When I went to school, and I later found out in life that I have dyslexia, and during the time I went to DC public schools, there was no provisions made or any type of accommodations made for kids that didn't learn like everyone else. So they were already prepping kids like me for not to succeed, because they instilled in us that we could not excel in that environment. We had to look at doing something, either a trade or something with our hands. And I can remember very clearly that one of my teachers told me that because they always ask you, what you want to be when you grow up? And I always wanted to be a doctor. And my teacher would tell me, you're not smart enough to be a doctor. You need to look at something like an auto mechanic or fix air conditioner, something like that.
Amidst the rhythmic beats of the drum corps and the backdrop of Martin Luther King's dream, Robert and his peers were crafting their identities. The drum corps, where Robert wielded his tenor drum, symbolized not just musical unity, but a collective spirit striving for a better, more equitable world.
I was like a snare drummer. Robert was a tenor drummer, and then he played the other instruments like the Tim Toms. And we really spent a lot of hours on the field, practicing. And then after practicing, we hung out.
In high school, I was an athlete, and that's what kept me in school. I played football, baseball, ran track. I played music as well. I did not get into the drug scene or the fast life until I graduated from high school. I started in all the sports that I played in. I lettered in all the sports that I played in. So my goal is to play sports in college or get a scholarship. I graduated from Anacostia High School in Southeast Washington, D.C. And from there, I got a job because my goal was to get a car. And my mother got me this red GTO. She signed for me to get it, but I had to pay for it. So I had to get a job when I got out of high school.
To truly understand Robert's journey, we must step back into the tumultuous embrace of the civil rights era. In the heart of this historic struggle, individuals like former Washington Post employee June Mayo took a stand, their lives intertwining with the narrative of progress. June's family stood as a testament to resilience, carving their space in the midst of adversity.
I had friends who had problems when they were hired on jobs for the first time, and they were the first blacks in situations. But something made me later on feel that sometimes people have problems because of how they've been raised. We were raised in a white neighborhood. We were raised by people who taught us to be civil, to be comfortable about who we were, and make no mistake about who we were and what our heritage was. Knowing that my great-grandmother built the house I grew up in gave me a lot of pride, gave me a lot of feelings of being able to own who I was.
The civil rights era was a time when the echoes of change reverberated through the nation, a call for justice and equality that reached the very neighborhood where Robert was coming of age. Not too far from where Robert lived, a parallel journey unfolded. TV producer Matoka Norris grew up with very similar struggles in a community reaching for freedom amidst the social upheaval of the time.
I grew up in a very unstable area of Southeast where drive-bys were a part of my life. People being murdered were a part of my life. Domestic violence was a part of my life outside of my home. There was nothing for me to see a drug addict on the street during the day. I had a strong mother. My mother's since passed away. But she was strong because she grew up in the South and she used to work on a farm. And she knew she didn't want to live that way. She moved to DC because she thought she'd be able to have a better life. Didn't turn out exactly the way she wanted it to. My mother had 3 children, and she was with my dad for a time, and then the 2 of them split up, so she became a single parent. I guess she thought the best way to handle our life was by education. She was a huge advocate for education because she did not receive the education that she thought she deserved when she was growing up. So she always pushed us, and I mean she pushed us. But she also took us out of the school system that was in my neighborhood. So I didn't go to the local schools. I went to Catholic school. Well, that in itself created problems because now my neighbors, the kids I grew up with, think for some reason I'm better than them because my mom can afford to send me to a Catholic school. Let's be clear, my mother could not afford to send us to Catholic school. And because she insisted on sending us to Catholic school, we suffered in other ways. There were times when we didn't eat. We didn't have heat in the house. We didn't have electricity. Sometimes we didn't have our water turned on.
The early 70s witnessed the relentless flooding of streets with drugs. A tidal wave of heroin, cocaine, and marijuana swept through communities, especially impacting the lives of Black individuals.
We were talking about the early 70s, mid 70s, when the Vietnam War was going on and drugs were rampant in this country. And they were flooding our communities with heroin, cocaine, marijuana.
Fueled by a determination to break free from the destructive cycle around him, Robert enlisted in the Navy. 3
friends of mine, we were standing around and wondering how we could do, what we were going to do with our lives. And one friend said, well, let's join the Navy. So I'd already been drafted, but I got deferred because I had a football injury in the Army because I did not want to go in the Army. So I went and took the test for the Navy and passed it. And the 3 of us did. We went to boot camp, and I was the only one that stayed in because it was pretty rough going. I stayed in boot camp. I was determined to stay in because I didn't want to come back to the environment I was in. But I also understood because the war was going on, I didn't want to be a part of the violence in Vietnam. So I looked around and decided what I could do in order, because I didn't want to fight on the ground. In the Navy, you were on a ship, so whatever you were involved with, and I just happened to be stationed on an aircraft carrier. So what I decided to do is that I wanted to go in photography school. I took the test to go to photography school, and I failed it. And what I did at that time, I had to figure out how I could get in photography school. I wrote my congressman at that time, who was Congressman Walter Fauntroy of D.C., and I explained to him the situation and told him that I was being discriminated against because they wouldn't let me in this photography school. Walter Fauntroy sent a note to my commanding officer on the USS Hancock and told him that he felt that I should be allowed to go to photography school. At that time, I was able to go to photography school. I was transferred to the USS Kitty Hawk in the photography lab, and that's where I learned photography.
Despite talent and passion, the doors to the media industry were often shut for aspiring Black individuals. Discrimination casts a long shadow, with bias prevailing and opportunities limited. Robert faced the formidable challenge of breaking down these barriers. Determined to carve a path for Black voices in an industry resistant to change.
If somebody tells you that there's no bias in the industry, they'd be lying. There's definitely, they've definitely made strides. Interestingly enough, I lived in Ohio before I came down here. And in Ohio, I couldn't even get my foot in the door. Down here, that's like literally from the time that I got here, I can practically work 24/7, mostly because I'm good at what I do. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be one of the few. There's definitely more Black engineering, in terms of audio and video engineering in this town than there is pretty much anywhere. I mean, I've worked, with a lot of different companies, and usually everybody behind the camera is white.
I would say it's been really, really trying. Most of my colleagues didn't respect a woman doing sound. It was furthermore foobarred, so to speak, because I was actually a feminine female also. So that was really, really trying. So BET was pretty open. And I started off there at BET. Like I said, I started and I was able to get on the console immediately and able to, do the newscast. I worked inside. I worked on Teen Summit. I worked on the latest show that I was doing was the Tavis Smiley show in the evening.
Robert's journey took an unexpected turn when a basketball injury in a war zone led to a medical discharge from the Navy. The seemingly unfortunate event, however, became a pivotal moment, opening doors that would otherwise have remained closed.
Having that experience, being classified as a disabled veteran, opened up opportunities for me at the time. Not only was I able to get a VA loan to go to school, but they had a program called the Voc Rehab Program where they paid for all of my education and gave me a stipend payment every month to go to school. I went to American University and I studied visual media and audio technology, which was in the physics department. It was very difficult getting through school, but I got through school. And while I was in school, I was introduced to a person that was working at WGLA. He was the executive producer there, and he took a liking to me, and he opened up some doors for me to get into WGLA Channel 7 locally here in Washington, D.C. So I went to school full-time, and I was working full-time at WGLA. And I started out as a floor manager, what they call them during those times, and I worked my way up to an engineer, a broadcast engineer.
Robert's career soared to remarkable heights as he began to make his mark on the media landscape, leaving an indelible print on networks including BET, ABC, and CNN.
I was able to get into the technical side of broadcasting. I left GLA, then I went to ABC Radio, and then from ABC Radio, I moved to Pittsburgh because my life was still in turmoil. And by this time I had a family. I had a young son and a wife, and I was still dipping and dabbing into the fast lane. And I think what turned my life around as far as getting, I guess, off drugs and not having any type of a dependency on drugs, I think was when my 4-year-old son saw me into a physical altercation over a drug deal gone bad. And I realized how that affected him. And I decided to go into rehab and got into a 12-step program. And that was like 33 years ago. And that's, I've been drug-free for 33 years. I got an opportunity to work at Black Entertainment Television. And then they brought me in as a director of audio operations. I credit that job as giving me the opportunity to learn a lot. Bob Johnson, who was one of my mentors in life, kind of took me under his wing and gave me opportunities and gave me the exposure that I think helped me to get to where I am today. I stayed at BET for 15 years. And during that time, I worked with some of the most famous people in the world in the Black entertainment and white entertainment community.
Not content with his own success, Robert began working toward breaking barriers by championing the hiring of fellow African Americans into prominent positions within these influential organizations. His commitment to diversity and inclusion reshaped the landscape of media representation.
Robert has always been about helping people. As long as I've known, he's helped everybody who I've known, who followed me up through Black Entertainment Television.
But Robert, he was always really trying to get, more Black people involved. He was always trying to encourage, that's would be the best word I could give, encourage Black people to learn and, excel, in their, chosen portion of the industry.
As a supervisor, you interact with all parties in a television production. So you have the lighting, stage crews, the director, the production crews. So it goes beyond just being responsible for audio. You're actually responsible for the entire productions. And Robert did do some production management, or EIC, I should say. That also goes to mentorship because, you bring in, and we had a pretty young staff at BET. They were very talented. I think the average age back then was in and around 25 years old, so there was a good place to learn, and Robert really was very good at teaching and developing persons. Persons would come in with raw talent, but he was a polished professional, so he could teach them not only the technical aspects of the job, but also the business of television too.
Robert's groundbreaking decisions extended beyond racial boundaries. At a time when the industry resisted the presence of women, he shattered norms by hiring and directing Black women into technical positions.
Robert takes any and everybody that works for him under their wing, and he will talk to you. What I love the most is that he would talk to you on your level. So a lot of people will talk to you with a whole lot of technical jargon, and he would meet you where you were. Right? And he would bring you from the basics and hand you those building blocks to get you where he needed you to be, which was awesome. Like an example of him taking me under his wing, they had this BET truck that was traveling around town, and he said, I want my intern to go. And so I went with him, and I was under him totally. I was hand in hand with him, learning, running the cables. So I was running cables under stage, micing instruments, doing everything from inside audio to outside audio. So he taught me the various jobs where audio was concerned, because there's so many different places that you could be as an audio engineer. And for that, I am thankful, because he made me well-rounded.
When it comes to the entertainment business, it does not get any bigger than Disney. And what it was we were opening a nightclub, because there was a number of other nightclubs down at Disney, and they wanted the Black experience at their nightclub. And he was the project manager. This was a construction job. So they had to renovate the facility, do all the design, all the architecture, and he coordinated all that. He was the project manager for BET, and so he met weekly with all of the key players, the general contractor, the architects, the integrators, and the Disney personnel also, and was there from start to finish to see that facility came on board. And then we did a production, and I think it was LSG. I know Gerald Levert performed. I think it was the group LSG. If you saw that initial production and you saw the reaction of one of the top Disney executives of the quality of the show and what it brought in terms of delivering on what they wanted, because they wanted that experience. And they, of course, Gerald Levert, put on a great performance that all people can go back to the OJs and all that kind of good stuff. So Robert was really the key player for that, and that's at BET. That was probably his biggest accomplishment. He had other things that we did, but that was significant.
So from BET, I went to NBC. I went to NBC as a operations technical manager, and I oversaw the Today Show, the Nightly News Show, the Chris Matthews Show. I was responsible for all those shows from the technical standpoint. I stayed at NBC for about 4 or 5 years. After a series of interviews, I was selected as Director of Operations at CNN. I was responsible for the Washington, D.C. News Bureau, the in-studio staff, the E&G field staff, the edit and post-production staff, all reported to me. I was part of building out part of their new control rooms and studios at the Bureau here in Washington, D.C. I stayed at CNN for about 2.5 years. After CNN, I left there and went to NPR as another technical operations manager. NPR had over 150 affiliate networks around the world. I was in charge of all the technical aspects of all the shows that were produced in the Washington, D.C. network.
In the twilight of his career, Robert shifted gears, founding B-Roll Media, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering young minds with the skills and knowledge needed to navigate the media industry.
I've had a lot of opportunities. I've had a lot of experience, and I've done a lot of things. How can I pass what I have on to youth? Because I particularly think you have to be of service in some area. And I thought the best way I can be of service is to give back to the youth with not only the experiences that I've had in life, work experiences and life experiences, but also be a mentor, be of some help to guiding a young child or a young or a person's life. So I started B-Roll Media and Arts, and B-Roll Media and Arts is a nonprofit that's based in Maryland that provides free of cost media and arts training and education to youth ages 13 to 21. Our mission is to provide these services, professional service in filmmaking, photography, audio, music recording, dance, visual arts, to youth underserved and youth with learning challenges.
I'm an artist myself. I'm not a big person to technology and media and the like that. But with Mr. Robert, he's opened doors for me and I took the opportunity. I opened up to photography. Photography is everything for me. It's another medium for me to enjoy and love as a hobby. And if with B-roll, it's opened up doors that I've never seen before. And it's like I found a new community for myself.
One of the things that attracted me to teaching with B-roll and has sort of fueled my friendship with Robert is his vision around giving young people opportunities, helping them to discover pathways that maybe he didn't understand when he was young. He talks a lot about his own background in school, his academic struggles, and how, the different opportunities that he was able to take advantage of, what they meant for him. So he wants to pay it forward. And so do I, because so many people have been helpful to me in my career. I would not know nearly the number of things that I know today had I not had a lot of mentors. And so it's like more than these classes, it's sort of a mission to introduce young people to the possibilities and then to provide them with the support, with mentorship.
I don't have many experience with B-roll as much as I want to have, but soon will be. But this one opportunity was Mr. Robert took us outside of the classes that we were taking. He was like, hey, would you like to come do this event shooting for a 5K run for autism in October? And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds new. It's out of my comfort zone because I'm not a big social person and big events and stuff like that. But I was like, sure, it's an opportunity, get out there, get some practice in shooting and whatnot. Me and my brother, we were there having fun, taking pictures, taking shots. And then I started to see how important it was to be out there, especially as a Black person, because you didn't see a lot of people of my color there. But I understood that it made me stood out. I was taking pictures, people were looking at me and they're like, wow, she really taking all her strides and going around everywhere just to see what the run was about. And it was so cool, and I met new people and I was meeting new friends, and it was a great opportunity for me. And it stood me out of my comfort zone.
Well, I would say, in a way, B-roll media is history in its present form. Because when you think about it, B-roll is just like documentation in history. When it's documented down, it's set there in stone for a long time until it's forgotten.
To have his name on your resume is a good thing. To allow him to represent you when you go forward and get your next job, to have your back is a good thing. I could mention his name and, he would always say, oh yeah, T-Rock, and he would do like, he would go, oh yeah, T-Rock, that was my project. And I kind of like really was, because when I started, I came from radio. I was at the point of my career where I had to make the choice of where I was going to go in front of the camera or behind the camera. And at that particular time, there were jobs behind the camera, not in front of the camera so much. And the person who was mentoring me at that time was like, hey, well, you go behind the camera, you can make a little bit more money. It was a no-brainer from that point, and that's how I met Robert.
When I had major surgery about 3 years ago, and during that time, some complications arose. And because of those complications, I had internal bleeding that they didn't find until it was too late. And I had what they call in the medical term, I coded, which means I transitioned, I died. And they had to bring me back. And I guess, by the grace of God, they did bring me back. And during that time, I was in a 2.5, 3 day coma period. During this whole time, being in that coma, I did not have any concept of time, animated of suspension. And there was a dark side that I was being pulled to, and there was a light side that I was fighting to get to. Now that force, or that magnetic pull that was pulling me to that dark area, and that's the only way I can describe it, because it just looked dark, and I can see it clearly as it happened just now. I was being pulled to that dark side, and it was like I'd never felt that type of force in my life, and I was fighting with every bit of energy that I had to get to the light that I saw. Now I know that they say when you go to the light, that's when you transition, but maybe that's the dyslexia that I have, that everything is reversed for me. But when I got to that light, it's when I woke up, and when I woke up, my wife and my sister were standing at my bed, and first thing I asked, how long was it? They told me 3 days I was in a coma, and I was on life support, and they had to take me off, and a whole bunch, So that to me reinforced that there is a power much greater than I am, and I'm here for a purpose. And so the purpose that I feel that I'm here for is provide this service for young people. And so whenever I get discouraged, or whenever I feel that I just can't do this, I reflect back on that moment when I had to fight to be here. And every day I try to take advantage of being here on earth and doing something positive, because I know I was given another chance.
Sit on the board of B-Roll Media and Arts, because we shared that vision.
We launched the Jazz Channel, which was pretty much exclusively jazz, but we obviously had interviews. So we did 40 concerts per summer with all of the top jazz musicians. And of course, he was instrumental in all of that. He set up and coordinated all of that.